Welcome to week 2. We're going to be covering how the law applies in your practice, and that probably is going to be a shocker to some of you, and others the cases you may say, oh, this is where we heard this before. So just bear with me. We're going to go through it and try and explain when you need an attorney, why you need an attorney, etc. this week. And after that, we can get into the actual problem areas, such as legal assistance in financing, legal assistance in insurance, legal assistance in dealing with employees, etc. But we're going to have the basics first, especially trying to reduce potential litigation, which is always very expensive. In fact, the goal of a lot of attorneys that I know is to help the client get out of having to go to court because of the tremendous expense involved. And many times the lawyer is quite blunt to you. You're better off settling for a lot less than spending the money to going to court and taking a risk of what you're going to lose or gain. So let's get started with our objectives for the week. First of all, we're going to discuss the reason to hire an attorney for the business. And I'll be quite blunt. If you're starting a business and you don't have an attorney working with you who is a business attorney, you're going to probably get yourself in a little trouble. It's going to, well, we'll get into that more, but it is really something you really have to have. Maybe you're not using them yet, but you have to have an attorney who knows who you are and what your business is, and probably has talked to you about the business plan you're creating. Second, you must understand the types of issues requiring legal assistance. Again, I find in many companies, the lawyers in the business, which I was on once, get the stuff when management doesn't know what to do, they go to their lawyer rather than going to the lawyer on legal problems. And again, what are the legal assistance you should be going to a lawyer with, as opposed to doing on your own as a manager. Third, describe some methods to reduce litigation, which I think is very helpful for anybody. And finally, the differences between business entities, which again is legalistic. Some people discuss it with their accountants because of tax issues, but tax is only part of the issue, as we'll discuss. Almost every day there's a new law affecting your practice. As a financial planner, you have to be concerned about legislation put out by the federal government. And it isn't just the laws and security exchange. Many times there's riders to a bill that affect you, and that bill may have nothing to do with our industry, but the rider added to it does. So let's say we've got a bill going through on education through the Congress, and one of the congressmen or senators adds in that financial planners must be licensed by the federal government. Nothing in the bill's overall statement of scope will mention that. And many times the general public doesn't even know it's in the bill, which might be 30, 70, 100 pages long, until the law is passed and they start issuing regulations. And then all of a sudden we see where either the Secretary of Treasury or the Security Exchange Commission starts saying all financial planners have to be registered. So federal legislation has to be watched because it does affect people, and many times it's hidden in bills. And again, many times you find out through the second point here, federal regulations. Federal regulations are what you really got to live with. The legislation is generally very vague. Let's face it, you're trying to get 50 senators and 435 congressmen to agree on anything is almost impossible because they all got big egos. And we found that out in 2017 when the Republicans couldn't agree on how to get rid of health care, which they were trying for 7 years to do, and nor could they do something as simple as changing the tax rates for corporations. So tend to be philosophical. Where it really gets meaningful for us is when they get down to the regulations, because regulations are what you're really obeying, and the regulations many times are very broad. In fact, we found certainly in the Obama administration that the regulations became much broader than the law ever called out, but you got to live with the regulations. As someone once told me, ignore the law, pay attention to the regulations. Federal courts also make decisions. And a federal court in Maine or a federal court in Seattle can affect you no matter where you're located in this country. We also have state and local legislation that makes laws continuously, and we don't really pay a lot of attention to it. I know here in California, each year I get the January edition of the Sacramento Bee, which is publishes all of the laws produced in the years, and it's a big document. But I'm looking for ones that would affect me, and that's usually the way I find out about it. And then I contact a local legislature and say, hey, by the way, I got this in the state passed this law last year. It's effective January 1st, and I'm in this position. Can you help me on this? And usually that congressional legislative aide, who's located in the same county I am, will tell me yes, it does, or no, it doesn't, or here, I'll get you more information. And that's the typical answer. And then you have the regulations eventually come out again that affect you. Again, it's hard to follow all those regulations because they're not published in most cases, especially local regulations where people can easily get a hold of it. Usually you find out about it when you're being penalized, unfortunately. And then we have state and local courts that come up with decisions that affect your practice. So all of these are things that can affect you, and I don't know how there's anything you can do your business and still keep track of this. What I usually do is say I have to have someone else keep track of it, and that's my business lawyer. And what you have to know is that business lawyers specialize, and there are business lawyers who specialize, for example, in the financial field we're in. And those are the ones I go to when I need advice, because they know what's happening in the various legal systems. And how do they know? Well, they hire or buy online services, and there's a number of them out there. West Publishing, and is one I can think of right now. CCH is another that publishes all of these regulations from the federal and the major state ones. But the local ones in that, they get usually obtained through their contacts, and the lawyers, and they keep close contact to the government officials in areas of their expertise. And finally, there's publications put out by the legal journals in areas, as well as by agencies. And in fact, California now has one where the state notifies small businesses of the types of taxes they can expect to incur. So there's a number of things that the lawyers rely on. And I think one of the ones that you probably use as part of your research in your programs when you're dealing with business law is going to be law reviews that are produced by various law schools in this country. In fact, we're going to use 2 articles in this course that cover for the clients, corporations, and their relationship with how they do business from a social and local environmental area, which I think are very interesting because it's not what people expect the answers to be. We'll cover that later in the course. And finally, the last statement is every business, when they're getting started and when they're putting together a business plan, should come up with a relationship with an attorney specializing in their field of practice. There's a lot of lawyers out there. The ones you want is someone who knows your problem areas, and again, ours is in the financial area. And I don't make any recommendations, but you might check with others who have used them and abuse them too, I guess, because a lot of times we dump things on the lawyers that are really management decisions. We just feel that we don't want to get involved. Tax law. Most business lawyers do not cover tax law, and thus the company needs to do one of 2 things. Use a tax law firm for questions regarding the tax law. And again, I have people say, well, I'm going to hire a tax attorney that can give me the answers to tax law and do my taxes. If you give a tax return to the attorney to do and ask them to do the taxes for you, you're probably going to find that a financial planner or an enrolled agent or a tax preparer or a CPA is actually doing the taxes. Very few tax attorneys get involved in doing the taxes. They're more concerned about the interpretations of the law, interpretation of the regulations, how to implement rules, etc. They do not do tax returns. I think maybe you might get someone just out of law school to do it, but I'm not sure I'd really want someone just out of law school because I'd like the experience doing it. So if you got a question about the law, that's when you go to the tax law firm. Or I would use the CPA or enrolled agents firm to handle tax returns. And again, I would probably go for one that specializes in service industries as opposed to one who specializes in manufacturing industries, because they have entirely different problems than you have as a service industry. And again, remember that because you're a professional service, you're subject to a special set of tax laws if you're a corporation, and that special tax laws means you pay a flat tax. So there's ways to get around it, which we'll discuss later in the course. The next point is use the tax planner, for example, financial planner, for taking proper tax saving steps in the future. And you say, I am a financial planner. A financial planner that specializes in taxation is what you'd like. Again, finance people in general who do taxes, such as CPAs or enrolled agents, are looking at the past and what the rules have been in the past and applying them for your cases. And sometimes they're doing taxes not only for this year, but last year and sometimes 3 or 4 years before. In fact, I had a case when in my tax practice some years ago where a mother came in. She said, my son was on drugs for 8 years. We got him freed from drugs now for a whole year, and we're trying to clean up his problems that he had, and we need help with you, Lee, working with the IRS to solve the 8 years he didn't pay income tax. Well, that sounded kind of complicated. And I said, well, how much did he make? And she said, oh, he made $2,000 or $3,000 a year. Well, I said, thank God, because at that amount, we don't need to file a tax return. So no problem. Again, when you get into the facts, then you get which I did with her, that makes either a big problem or a low problem. In this case, it was no problem at all. But again, you need a tax expert. On past history, you go to a CPA and enrolled agent. People who give advice on the future are in many cases financial planners. Some of them may not be certified financial planners, some may be. I go more in the case when we're talking about taxes, here's what their experience is, but they give some good advice. In fact, I've seen even economists who are good at giving advice on future tax savings. What can you do in the future to reduce your taxes? And so what I'm basically saying that when we get in the tax area, you're not going to be using your business attorney. You're going to be using attorneys for trying to find out what the rules are applying to you. For doing the tax returns would be one group, and for tax planning, which is a good idea, for another. Certainly tax planning should be included in the business plan you have, just as your clients do. Our next topic is going to cover role of attorney in your practice. And I know some of you are saying, we don't want any attorneys. Well, I'll tell you, I have been in business a long time. I've had businesses, everything from real estate, import business. I've also had financial planning business, tax business, and a couple of others, restaurant businesses, etc. And in every case, I found that my contemporaries who did not use an attorney had more problems than those of us who did use an attorney. Again, not that you're going to them all the time, but you have someone available who knows who you are and what your business is and can get advice on a basis. Now, typical areas where you need assistance, and again, having worked for large companies also, I know in large companies you have lawyers on staff, and I was a staff lawyer. I can tell you this, they come in with the problems that they don't like to handle rather than legal issues. But and I think the problem is most business people don't know what they should go to the lawyer on. Well, I'm going to tell you what it would be. First of all, when you're doing your business plan, determine what type of business type you should have. You really need a lawyer. Now, you can go on and one of these $99 internet deals that set you up as a business, limited liability company or corporation, etc. But it's not going to solve your problems. It doesn't take into account your industry, your tax situation, what your objectives are, if it's a family-owned business or if it's one that you're going to maintain for the rest of your career or you're going to keep it for 5 years. All of those affect the type of business type you should have. And lawyers really can do that. There are some CPAs, but they're relatively limited. And it's a good starting point to get a relationship with a lawyer by talking about the type as you're working on your business plan. And same way with your clients, they should be doing the same thing. Then when we format the formation of our business, we have decided to go a limited liability company. That's called on our plan. We need a lawyer really to help us set it up. What state should we put it in? It doesn't have to be the state you're physically located to have a business ownership. And there's certain states that you want to stay away from, certain states you want to be in. I know I've always avoided California as being a state of incorporation or a state of ownership of anything other than sole proprietorship. But again, the lawyers are good at giving you that information. The employment law. If you're a self-employed person, you really are an employer of yourself. And if you hire somebody as a self-employed person or as having a business that's a separate entity, you have to have the employment laws met. And the first thing you have to have is the employee identification number, which again, where do you get that information? You get it from the lawyer. Usually, some CPAs again, but again, CPAs are not familiar with all employment law. They're familiar with the employee identification number, but not all the other things you have to do as far as registration, licensing, etc. Local regulation compliance. Every company is going to be subject to local regulations. The simplest, of course, is fictitious name it. If you got a name you're using other than your own for your business. So instead of John Smith Financial Planner, you're calling yourself Westlake Financial Planners. Because it's not your name being used with Westlake Financial Planners, you're going to have to comply with local regulations. The lawyer's helping that. Labor law compliance. Once you've got the employees, you've got to worry about the unions. You got to worry about employee grievances. You got to worry about if I want to terminate employee, if I want to lay off employee, whatever. You need help. Contracts and other business documents. Again, I've seen where small business gets started. They will take something they got on the internet as far as a contract and use it. Contracts really have to be tailored for your business and what you're trying to achieve, not the boilerplate. And when you use the boilerplate, quite honestly, if there's a problem, you lose. That contract and other legal documents should be set up for your business and what you're trying to achieve. Liability actions, another area that you got to be concerned about. Getting sued because someone tripped on your rug, someone was in your office and opened a page and got a paper cut on his finger and got infected. Someone was in your office and sat down on a chair and the chair gave way. All of these are things that happen in the real world. Any notices you get from courts, which are obvious. Marketing restrictions. What can you do marketing-wise and not do marketing-wise? I can see in my career a lot of people who got in trouble because of the way they marketed. They just didn't know what the rules were. I always run it by an expert, which is usually my business lawyer, about any type of marketing changes I want to make, either relationships with other parties or maybe slogans, etc. It turns out one of the slogans I wanted to use was trademarked in the same area I was, so that caused a problem. Antitrust laws, and the 7 should be an and sign. Antitrust laws and regulations. You're never going to get those right. They are very complicated, and they actually do apply to small companies. A one-person company could be violating an antitrust law, believe it or not. Intellectual property, such as patents, trademarks, copyrights, your name of your company, your slogans, your company, all this most of the time has to be registered if you want to get any protection. I know copyrights, a lot of people say, hey, you don't have to register copyright. Well, if it's copyrighted material you want to protect so that people don't use it, you're going to have penalties go with it. Then you're going to have to comply with the copyright laws. You just can't mark it as being copyrighted, which has very limited protection. Licenses and leases, which we'll be talking about, which again, I would say the average person starting a business signs a lease with a rental company, and that lease salesman was such a nice guy, the agent. He was obviously thinking your best interest, and then you find out not only are you paying a monthly rent, but you're paying for the taxes, you're paying for the insurance, you're paying for upkeep of the landscape, and when some of the other people in the building are having refurbishment, you got to pay for part of that refurbishment. Why? Because you didn't look at the lease. Because it was such a nice guy working with you who really liked you. Again, I run all leases or licenses by a qualified attorney, which again is my business attorney. Some general rules. Attorney must know your business. That's the need for a relationship, and should be very early in the business. So if you're going to start your own financial planning business, I would certainly, as I'm working on my business plan, be talking to attorneys. And being a student is a perfect time to talk to attorneys, because it's obvious you're not going to be hiring right now, and he's thinking of the future, and so he can lead you in the right direction. And I think if I was a young person starting a business, anybody under 50, I guess, to me, and I was going to be a financial planner on my own, I would definitely get the attorney and say, I'm a student and I'm going to start my practice when I get out of school, and I need to have a lawyer, and I was wondering if we could have a discussion to see if you and I have the right mix. Too often business decisions are transferred to the attorney for decision making. That happens all of the time. And the way I put it is very simple. Lawyers recommend and business owners must decide. A lawyer can tell you the advantages and disadvantages, what's legal and what's not legal. You got to make a decision. And there's times you might do something that's illegal, and the consequences are nil. If it's only $100 fine, it might make a lot of sense to do it, even if it's illegal. Now, you got to again think about, okay, does that violate my CFP ethics standard? And if it doesn't violate my ethics standard and it's only $100 fine, it might be worth it. And I'm thinking of the person who has a business, and there's no place for him to park, so he sort of creates a parking spot in front of his business and puts a sign up that says reserved for clients of lease you. Well, that might be all right with you, but you're probably violating some local law, and you got to pay a fine on it. Well, if you pay the fine, if it got you the parking spot for a while, it probably was worth it. When you go to see a lawyer, you need to bring all the facts and documentations with you. For example, if you're working on your business plan and you're still a student and you're visiting him, I would take whatever you are on that business plan and your thoughts. If you're already done with the business plan and you're starting your business, I would take that with them. If you're in business already, I would take the documentation you have, where you stand. It doesn't matter if it's your licenses, your permits, all of that should be going with you when you visit the tenant lawyer. It's better to bring too much data than not enough. And I would say the next comment here is terrible but common tendencies to leave out the bad news. And that's one of the reasons lawyers get frustrated with their clients, is they don't usually get the bad news. They find out the bad news when there's a lawsuit, and they get it from the other side, during the discovery process. Then there's preventive action is better than after the fact advice, and that I really believe doing it and then saying I'm sorry might work in politics, but it doesn't work with your clients. and nor with your suppliers very often, because people don't forget that you've done it. So if you want to be a politician, go ahead, do it and apologize, but don't try doing it as a financial planner. How often do you want to meet with your attorney? And the answer to me is not always, not all the time. But when a business problem is expected, for example, local regulation came up that's threatening your business, and you're typically going to find this out because the lawyer is going to send you an email or a letter saying, I've been notified that the city of Thousand Oaks has issued a new ordinance that says that any service organization must pay an additional $200 per employee as employee fees for the city. And you usually get that from the lawyer. And again, that's one of the important reasons for using a business lawyer that's local. When problems arise, for example, union contracts, your employees are told, when there's a union contract, I started again over. When unions contact your employees, is a good time to contact the lawyer. Or if you think the union is contacting your employees, or if you've been told that there's a lack of diversity in your business, and that happened to me, where I was told I had a lack of diversity, and I said, maybe I better get some advice. So I went to my attorney, and he checked it out for me. Changes in business practices, for example, you have a new logo, you're entering into a basic ordering agreement with a supplier, you're canceling a contract or agreement that you have with the client or supplier. Good idea to talk to the attorneys first. Many times you're better off biting the bullet and keeping the contract and canceling it because of various fines and penalties, etc. And then during quarterly annual advisory council meetings, in other words, businesses have advisory council meetings or board of directors, or sometimes both. In either case, what you need is someone who gives the advice that you need in order to run your business, and that's going to include lawyers, your CPA, your insurance agents, your bankers, etc. And lawyers have to be one of them. When should an attorney be contacted in emergency off hours? This is at 3 o'clock in the morning, or a Sunday morning, or Thanksgiving Day. You get a notice from a government official advising you're charged with fraud or other criminal act. And that could be even tax notice that you're guilty of tax fraud. Notify your attorney. In the case of tax fraud, notify your tax advisor, the attorney. You're arrested and it involves the business. If it involves the business, contact the attorney. Now, if it involves drunk driving, assaults, or similar type of things, family disputes, don't contact your business attorney. You have to contact someone who specializes in that area, or a general practitioner attorney, or whatever you want. But your business attorney knows nothing about drunk driving and assaults, etc. It's like going to your cardiologist for your heart and telling him you got a problem with your kidney. Well, that's not their expertise. And someone or a group is preventing entrance to your business. In other words, there's people outside preventing people from coming into your business. That is a good time. 24 hours a day if they're doing that. Anytime you should get a hold of an attorney.